Welcome to the Beau Show. I've spoken to you before about the importance and essence of tradition, because tradition retains part of our history and cultural significance. As times change, so do many attitudes, which is fine to some degree, but maintaining a modicum of tradition can also be important, since old world values can be diluted so much over time that we forget what they ever once were. I remember playing with G.I. Joes and Transformers as a kid, and I think there's part of a child's developing brain that plays out a wild but important imagination. You put yourself in the story as the hero. I will admit that I was never a big comic book kid, opting more for Nintendo, but I do remember the comics about Superman, Batman, and other various heroes. There was always a certain redemptive moral of good winning over evil. When DC Comics announced that their new superhero would be different, I cringed a bit, because I know what that means. I know what alternative lifestyles and theories can do to traditional values. But I don't think I was quite prepared for how different this new hero would be. I'm speaking about Jonathan Kent, who is the comic book son of Superman, who is Clark Kent, and Lois Lane. Clark Kent first donned the Superman cape back in 1938, so there's some really deep history embossed in American culture. Just like his dad, John Kent has fallen for a reporter by the name of J. Nakamura. He and John become romantically involved in the pages of Superman, Son of Kal-El #5 from writer Tom Taylor and artist John Thames. Following a scene where Superman mentally and physically burns out from trying to save everyone that he can, his love interest, Jay, is there to care for the Man of Steel. I guess steel will also have some ambiguity in this new edition. Tom Taylor said, quote, "I've always said everyone needs heroes, and everyone deserves to see themselves in their heroes. And I'm very grateful DC and Warner Brothers share this idea. Superman's symbol has always stood for hope, for truth, and for justice. Today, that symbol represents something more. Today, more people can see themselves in the most powerful superhero in comics," unquote. What he's saying has some truth to it. As I mentioned earlier, how as kids we kind of fantasize and put ourselves in the story and make ourselves the hero. But the part I think he's getting off track on is that everyone deserves to see themselves in their heroes. There may be qualities of a hero that we may be able to see in ourselves, but isn't the point of a hero that such a person has qualities that supersede our own capabilities? Isn't that why he's called Superman? I mean, it's true that, and it's kind of cool if we see one of our heroes and he or she is just like us. You've heard the expression, they put their pants on one leg at a time just like we do. Yet, now I'm not even sure we can use the word pants anymore because that may be too gender normative. But these heroes don't just put on their pants and act like us. They are heroes because they did something well beyond normal capability. They are superhuman. I think about Peyton Manning or Joe Montana. These athletes did almost superhuman things. I met Joe Montana, and I'll admit that he was such a down-to-earth, nice guy. And I liked that he had that comportment. But yet, I am not Joe Montana. I didn't win 4 Super Bowls. He's the GOAT. So Joe did something most of us did not and cannot do. So what this Superman writer, Tom Taylor, is saying is that everyone should feel represented in a Superman. He's making a comment about diversity, not quality of character, and that's where I think they're going astray. The goal shouldn't be, wow, I can see myself as Superman because we share the same orientation. But perhaps it should be because of their muster or their endurance or their work ethic. Those are the things that get us ahead in life and set us apart. In Jeff Olson's book, The Slight Edge, he says that the reason that only about 1 out of 20 people are successful is because that one person is willing to do the things on a daily basis with consistency that the other 19 are either too lazy or unwilling to do. And that's a product of your personal convictions and your work ethic, not a product of who you love or what new identity you may have today. Tom Taylor said in an interview, quote, "The idea of replacing Clark Kent with another straight white savior felt like a missed opportunity. A new Superman had to have new fights. real-world problems that he could stand up to as one of the most powerful people in the world, unquote. Think about that mentality. The idea of replacing Clark Kent with another straight white savior felt like a missed opportunity. By default, this means that they have abandoned the thought of a superhero being white or straight, which are qualities a person cannot help or can change, right? So they're basing their superhero on a favored genetic quality and sexual orientation. The choice for them is not, hey, let's just mix it up a bit here. There's a certain disdain for a comic character being white and straight, as if it's a problem. I think about Gillette's famous toxic masculinity Super Bowl ad, and the idea that all straight guys who like football were just inherently bad. That's when I really started to notice this drastic change in attitudes and mores in traditional culture, such as football. It was the rise of the beta male, where alphas were looked down upon. Terms such as gender fluidity became commonplace. This latest diversity move in the comic world is hardly new, though. Batman's sidekick Robin has expressed a romantic affinity for men, and a new Aquaman will be a gay black man. Psychologist Frederick Wortham wrote a book in 1954 called Seduction of the Innocent, which raised concerns about the effects of sex, gore, and violence on young people, and especially the connection between comic books and juvenile delinquency. That book inspired a congressional hearing and the creation of the 1956 Comics Code Authority, in which comic makers set a standard of what could be depicted. That year, they introduced Batwoman as a love interest, who didn't reappear until 2006. And part of Batwoman's newest backstory is that she leaves the military for refusing to lie about being a lesbian. The evolution of comic heroes has certainly come a long way, but it has bent to the pressure of societal changes and pushes for diversity. The fact that this Superman, maybe the most iconic superhero out there, will be bisexual is a big change. But are the consumers of comic books largely LGBTQIA? That's my question. Because if they are not, this is just one big virtue signal. They aren't bending to the demands of the market, but rather trying to fit in or modernize with a cultural shift. Rather than embracing traditional values, they have made John Kent into something very different. He apparently will combat fires caused by climate change. Have a look at the words in the bubble uttered by John Kent in the comic. You can see what I can see, Dad. Oceans struggling to breathe, forests disappearing, ice melting, inaction due to selfishness and fear, division and tribalism, and stupid borders. I'm sorry, stupid borders? That's just insane. And then John says, it could be a place where every problem is tackled if only the world would unite, a place where no one is left behind. Good grief. Here's what I want to know. If John is so worried about climate change, why is he not using his cape, well, thank God it's not a fossil fuel powered jet, to fly over to China to speak to President Xi about pollution? Or is little John more worried about stupid borders? And if he's so worried about fear and division and tribalism, we need to see John Kent having a conversation with, Anthony Fauci or George Soros, Kamala Harris, Al Sharpton, and AOC. Just wait. I envision a future plot with John wearing AOC's Tax the Rich dress. Can you imagine it? To make a pun, that dialogue that I just read you from the actual comic is, well, comical. Apparently, John and Jay will share a kiss in an upcoming storyline, and it will be discovered that Jay has special powers. To me, what they are implying is that being non-straight is not just preferred, but it is actual superpower. And that's interesting, because they're empowering a superhero based on his sexual orientation and his wokeness, and his protesting of refugees being moved from Metropolis. But if they really wanted to make a big splash, and I mean in a good way, why not make John Kent have perhaps a physical disability? I'm thinking right now about two leaders, Representative Madison Cawthorn in Congress and Governor Greg Abbott of Texas, who are both in wheelchairs. Didn't seem to slow them down one bit, did it? They could create a superhero with a physical impairment, but a different type of superpower. Maybe it's the power of negotiation. Maybe they can stop China from live organ harvesting, or India from polluting, or Kim Jong-un from preventing his citizens from leaving North Korea. I mean, do you see what I mean? If they wanted to make sure everyone sees themselves in a superhero, what better way to do that than to empower those folks who have mental or physical disabilities, to show that they too can have a different type of super ability? But rather, they elected to favor race and sexual orientation. That was their choice of superpower, and fighting a cultural fight against national borders and man-made climate change, which, by the way, kills fewer people than just about anything else. The trend of impact of climate change is downward, not upward. When does John Kent get to fight the opioid epidemic, or the obesity epidemic, or the Fauci epidemic, or the Wuhan lab? God, I should have written for DC Comics. I missed my calling. Perhaps the most diabolical change in this character is his motto. Superman's motto used to be truth, justice, and the American way. They have changed it to truth, justice, and a better world. That's a major, major shift. They have taken America completely out of it. He's no longer an American. He's now a globalist. And this was the straw that broke the camel's back for DC Comics colorist Gabe El-Taib, who is quitting his job. Listen to what El-Taib has to say.
But then something horrible happened. Some really, really ugly people came along and started messing with our business. This is Tim Duran. I call him Pampy. He's my maternal grandfather. He survived the Great Depression, and after that he got shipped off to go fight in the Pacific and watch his friends' guts spill on the beaches as they fought against Toho's army. This guy right here, you know, friends with this guy. He was the best man I ever knew, and I'm not going to let him down now. Oh, and let's not forget this guy. This guy right here. I've been able to beat up my dad since I was 18. Look at him laughing there. And now, look into those eyes. I want you to think about those eyes. This is a man from Libya, and guess who he stood up to? This guy, right here. And it cost him. They killed my dad's friends, and they killed my grandfather. So my dad decided to be bold and risk it all and leave this place and come to this place. A place he had no familiarity with, a place with a completely different culture. But it was a culture he embraced and a culture he completely thrived in. I couldn't be more proud of my father. If my father didn't have the courage to stand up for what was right, then I might be this guy, or one of these guys, or who the hell knows, I might be this guy, or just in a grave somewhere in Libya.
El-Taib quit because DC Comics went woke and changed that slogan. He said, quote, "My grandpa almost died in World War II. We don't have a right to destroy, expletive, that people died for to give us. It's a bunch of effing nonsense," end quote. He said, his decision was not about Jonathan Kent being gay. He said he pushed Jerry Robinson's wheelchair at a Comic-Con. Robinson is the guy who created the Joker. And El-Taib thanked him for creating those characters so that guys like himself could find a job with passion. So what does Pink News, a gay website, call El-Taib? A snowflake colorist. See, this is the problem. DC Comics has gone full tilt woke. And okay, they created a gay superhero. It would be one thing to just create that, but the reasoning that they used showed where their mentality really was. It was not just a promotion of a different identity, it was a demotion of another identity. It showed preference. And then look at the issues they want John Kent to deal with. Climate change, refugees, borders, all the stuff that wokies want. And once again, they're taking a political stand. They are embracing and prizing leftism rather than common sense. They've made John Kent a globalist, someone who wants open borders. But I'll ask once again, what are the real world evils that John is actually fighting? Okay, I have some suggestions. The Chinese Communist Party, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, ISIS, MS-13 gangs, the opioid epidemic, human trafficking, the legacy of Jeffrey Epstein, off-the-cliff spending and debt, drug trafficking, obesity, depression, suicide, veterans' medical care, supply chain failures, inflation and stagnation, crime, Chinese lab leaks. I could go on and on. But you see, when you put writers like Tom Taylor in charge and DC comic execs who are hardcore lefties, this is what you get. By Gabe El-Taib leaving, there are likely not many more traditional patriots in the DC world. And for Gabe, it wasn't even about the sexualization. It was about how a real superhero could right the wrongs of the world and make America a better place. After all, wasn't he American? Isn't that kind of the point? America is a leader. But the DC franchise wants to reduce American exceptionalism in favor of globalism. John Kent won't be about promoting the American way. See, the folks embracing these diversity changes think that critics are being bigoted or snowflakes or homophobic. But that's not it. We are seeing a degradation and erosion of tradition. Saving children from a fire, okay, that's a noble thing. But saving them from a fire that is explicitly the result of climate change is political. Calling the borders stupid is a leftist political axiom. They have made John Kent into a leftist, hiding behind diversity and avoiding another straight white savior, as if no savior could be or should be straight or white. So you have to read between the lines. And I'll go back to the Gillette commercial just for a minute. It's not that we shouldn't be cognizant of boorish, immature, derogatory behavior by some men. But reading between the lines, the implication is that all men are like this toxic masculinity. They depicted normal guys cooking in the backyard and boys playing football. So where was the commentary about the actual domestic abusers that still play in the NFL? Kareem Hunt or Antonio Brown, perhaps. I believe he caught a few TDs in the Super Bowl last year. They missed that, I guess. So in the comic world, it's not just about what they say they're celebrating, it's what they are abandoning in the process and what they are eroding. If you look at the way John Kent looks, he seems like a beta male. Super tight, skinny jeans, a tie-dye hoodie. I don't think John Kent is the son of Clark Kent and Lois Lane at all. If he is, he's watched way too much CNN. But I think he's more likely the son of AOC and Bernie Sanders. That's what would give rise to such a superlib. Removing the notion of a better America and promoting a better world, and I think that's just the beginning. I've said this before, but when you don't have diverse ideologies in a collaborative room, you'll never hear a full story. If you inculcate yourself only with people that think like you will blind yourself to reality. DC and the comic world in general have eroded tradition in favor of wokeism, and so is the NFL. So have the movies and TV industry and everything else, even comedy, as we have seen recently with Dave Chappelle. And sadly, Netflix's CEO has gotten a little bit soft in dealing with the backlash to Chappelle's Netflix special. But Chappelle isn't backing down. He's doubling down. Maybe he should be the next DC superhero. Think about it. A comedian that stands up to woke liberals. He wouldn't be so worried about the border situation. He'd be worried about, his local establishment getting burned down in a riot or being so locked down that he can't do a show. After all, it doesn't matter if you're black or white or straight or gay if you can't do anything, right? Isn't freedom really what we want? Nobody wants someone else's lifestyle or choices shoved down our throats. We just want the freedom to live our own way, to pursue our own dreams. I don't have to participate in your identity. That's on you. That's what America affords you. The right to speak, the right to assemble, the right to choose, to be who you want to be. But all of that is rooted in tradition. That's why we celebrate Thanksgiving. But then you get people who don't want to celebrate it because, they think it's offensive to Native Americans. So we can't celebrate Thanksgiving. We can't celebrate Columbus Day because they've now changed that day to Indigenous Peoples Day. We can't celebrate President's Day because of slavery. We can't celebrate July 4th because liberals are afraid of American flags waving in the back of Ford F-150s. We can't celebrate Team USA's wins because we have athletes kneeling or turning their backs when the anthem is played. We can't even have an anthem at sports games anymore. So do you see the gradual erosion of tradition and values over time? And if we don't have creatives and leaders standing up for America's traditions and principles, this is just going to keep continuing to happen. Someone should be out there creating a great alpha male superhero who tackles totalitarianism and terrorism and communism. Hey, you might fall in love with a superhero woman who tackled Harvey Weinstein and Jeff Epstein and Bill Clinton. For every John Kent and Superfemme, we need Super Alpha and Patriot Woman. We are watching culture devolve right before our very eyes. And no, I don't really read comics. I never really did. I'm not even offended that this is happening. I'm not being a snowflake. I'm merely raising awareness for the fact that everywhere you turn, you are seeing a gradual erosion of American values and traditions, which means we need to see more people step up to the plate to preserve them. I'm Beau, and that's the show.